Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, February 11th, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research Channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, we are going to continue with part two of my series looking into the accounts of the quote unquote giants or large hominids, as I like to call them, international. And in this video, I want to cover Italy and Sicily. And there's not a lot of accounts from Italy or Sicily. There's more from Italy than there is of Sicily, but it doesn't matter. It just is equally as fascinating as any of the accounts that we've gone through so far. But let's take a look at some of these accounts here and see what we can make out of them. So the first article here is about this Maximinus Thrax, which I mentioned before when I covered the article from, I think it was National Geographic, about the skeletal remains dug up there in Italy. There was a rather large skeleton, so naturally it had to have gigantism or acromegaly because, no such sort of races of people existed in the past, so therefore it just has to be some sort of, you know, deformed human being, and it could be nothing else. So, but this doesn't seem to be the case with this Maximinus Thrax guy because he was 8'6" in height and a rather big, muscular guy who's a fierce fighter. And so he apparently wasn't suffering from gigantism or acromegaly. Apparently, people who do have those sort of maladies suffer from all sorts of upper respiratory and heart problems and skeletal issues and all that kind of stuff. So this is not one of them. So I don't know if there ever has been skeletal remains dug up that were of such a of nature that they would say, "Oh, this is just a gigantic human being." I've never heard that. Just every single one that's particularly tall has to have some sort of disease or something like that. So this is where they lose me, and I'm sorry. I hate to tell them this. They lose a lot of other people with this who can think for themselves. Okay, so this Max Minus Trash is a rather giant guy. This is rather lengthy title there, which is not too important, but they tell you a little bit about his history here. Maximinus was probably the biggest man ever to hold the office of a Roman emperor. The Historia Augusta has it that he was 8'6" 2.6 meter tall, and so strong that he could pull laden carts unaided. So I don't know, how many laden carts, but you see these strongman competitions where they're pulling a bus and all those kind of things. But the size of his footwear was also legendary, and the expression Maximinus's boot came to be used in popular parlance for any tall or lanky individual. Surviving portrait busts, such as this one from the Louvre, show Maximinus as a heavily muscled man with powerful jaw and close cropped hair, the image of a seasoned soldier. Not for him the meditative spiritual pose favored by Alexander Severus. So, in any case, they tell you about the history of his life. It's unimportant. It's just that this guy existed at this height, 8'6". It was absolutely gigantic. I stood next to a 7 foot guy. I'm 5'8", and the guy looked like a giant next to me. This guy would just dwarf me. It's just miniature human being and giant human being if I was to stand next to this fellow. And again, he was not suffering from acromegaly or gigantism. And, it may be that, certainly at this time, we've covered the evidences in the Americas of these giant chieftains. Okay, apparently some of these hybrid giants, human hybrids, survived into historic times, and this is what the people were talking about. And I wonder how much the giants play into this whole historical reset narrative. I mean, obviously, if they were around in the past and were so prominent in the world, um, the whole historic reset narrative may be following on the footsteps of the whole giant issue. So, it's interesting to ponder these things, and it's possible that the whole historical reset issue has something to do with the past civilizations of the giant humanoids. I don't know. I'm just guessing because we don't really know the past. And certainly these giants devolved through the ages up until historical times. And it seems just prior to that, and many millennia before that, is when the whole process of the whole giant genocide started happening. So fewer and fewer of them as time went on. Bones of an 8 foot tall giant, Lombardy, Italy. The skeleton of the giant Rodchis was excavated in 1976-78 at the Castello di Trezzo d'Adda in Italy. This giant was of the royal lineage of the giant king Pete of Lombardy, circa 700 AD. The skeleton was in fact buried in a coffin 2.40 meter long, but the legs were bent to accommodate his height. He was around 2.50 meter tall, 8'3". The remains found on the site are kept in the Archaeological Museum of Milan, but the bones are not visible to the public. And I wonder why. They have everything else, and here's a picture of it, of him in the sepulcher there, and with his legs bent there. Although I don't see why he needed to bend him. It looks like there's room to put him straight. But in any case, the skeleton of the giant Rodchis was excavated in 1976-78 at the Castello di Trezzo d'Adda in Italy. This giant was a royal lineage. I guess this is just saying the same thing that I just said. This signet ring was part of a group of objects buried with a man from the Longobarд aristocracy. It is an important finding in it that it helps reconstruct the roots of Lombard civilization. It was found at Trezzo Solata near Milan and is now conserved at Milan's Archaeological Museum. It is made in gold with engraved decoration, and it features a bearded man's face, presumably the king or another prominent figure in the Longobard kingdom. It began to a person authorized to sign and seal deeds. The gesture made by the figure was typical of emperors and Roman commanders when encouraging troops. Around the face, there is an inscription referring to the owner of the ring, and on the reverse side, his title, Rodgers Fifth. The photo shows a tibia that is fully 1/3 longer than a normal Roman man's. The length of the tibia, based on a 7 centimeter ruler, would have been 50 centimeters long, or nearly 20 inches. I think the man was more like over 7 feet tall, and Nat Geo is underreporting his stature. A tibia of 50 centimeters would belong to a man more on the order of 7 feet to 7 feet 3 inches. Okay, and during the guided tour, which lasts about 2 hours, you can visit a small but comprehensive archaeological museum which holds the important tomb of the giant of Lombard, the evocative ruins of a garden, the impressive underground on the tower with its steps suspended in the air. The castle is open on Sundays and public holidays, 14:30 to 18:30, from March to October. In the summer months, you can also walk among the ruins in a charming nocturnal visit. The tours cost €4, free access to the park instead. Okay, so they show more pictures there. So I guess we covered. Then they opened it and found this guy's skeletal remains inside. This giant skeletal remains. It's important to note that this is a recent find, as some skeptics misplace their loyalty to less capable, less reliable hands in modern times. Proof for giants will continue, and I, as well as others, will be there to bring these exciting examples of greater anthropology. Whether 7'3" to 8 foot tall, the modern tales of mankind being smaller in the past remains to be unseen. And what I want to say before was that we also have to take into account that all skeletal remains of any variety all shrink over time. So they're actually shrunken down from the height that they actually were. You have to keep that in mind with any skeletal remains. 7'9" skeleton. Giant skeletons found in a cave, Rome, April 27th. Legal proceedings are in progress over some grottos near the Mediterranean coast, not far from Nice, which are remarkable for the prehistoric remains found in them. At present, 3 skeletons found there are figuring in the law courts. One is that of a man whose estimated height was 7 feet 9 inches. The head of the skeleton is missing. Another is the skeleton of a woman 6 feet 3 inches tall. And the third is that of a youth. I wonder how tall he was, and tall as any average sized man today, I'm sure. These, added to previous discoveries, make 7 skeletons of prehistoric people unearthed up to the present time in the caves. The Italian government has not attempted to exercise any rights in the matter. Riviere discovered the skeletons of one man and two children, which were some 29 feet below the surface of the caves and were surrounded by undoubted Paleolithic implements bedded in the compact limestone. The caves have already proved the richest in prehistoric remains yet known, and the pending proceedings are consequently very interesting. So, who knows what happened to in the legal tanglings of this whole thing? Probably thrown all in the garbage at the end of the whole thing, confiscated by the court. Who knows? 7-foot giants, Mentone, Italy, Balsi Rossi caves near Mentone. Unfortunately, as in a former case, it was not made by a scientific excavator, but by men engaged in quarrying the limestone cliff. I visited the spot shortly afterwards on more than one occasion, but the ornaments and implements had been removed by the owner of the quarry to his house, and there was some difficulty in ascertaining the exact position in which the several relics were discovered. See, there's a problem with these things in the past. These amateurs or whatever took these things into possession, and who knows? No scientific, collecting there of data, so we don't know what the heck's going on. The subjoined sketch will give a fair notion of the position in which the bodies were found. They lay across the present mouth of the cave with their heads to the east. The outermost skeleton was that of a man apparently well on in life. Unfortunately, the skull was broken with a blow of a pick at the moment of discovery, and the length of the skeleton can therefore be only approximately given. From his heel to his shoulder, he measured 1.85 meters, so that he was probably at least as tall as the taller of the 3 adult skeletons found in 1872 and 1873, which reached the length, according to Mr. Revere, of 2 meters. This gigantic frame was somewhat turned to the left, but it lay more on its back than the other two. By his left hand, laid close to his femur, lay a long flint knife. About the neck on the skull were remains of ornaments of teeth and bone, fish vertebra, and pierced shells, among them many Nasud neritae, and on the legs, a little below the top of the tibias, were two cyprius, which I guess are some leg ornaments, knee ornaments, or whatever. But the point is these fish vertebrae and pierced shells around their necks. Fish figured heavily in the diet of these people in the past. Again, not eating as much red meat as we think. All right, so immediately behind this latest skeleton, recognized by Dr. Bruneau as that of a woman, it rested on the left side with the knees slightly drawn up and its right hand almost resting on the giant's shoulder. It is said to have had another flint knife. This female skeleton was not so richly decked with ornaments as the other two, the bone and tooth pendants being wanting in this case. Okay, so they didn't have the fishbone necklaces and the pendants there or whatever, so just very interesting. And a flint knife, so this obviously goes way, way back in time, to Neolithic or Paleolithic times, or what we call that. And it could be quite much older than that. But again, 7-foot giants to me suggest a later time in the giants' history when they were becoming more hybrids and their height was actually starting to decay. Giant skeletons found in an ancient Roman town, 1955, the Calgary Herald. Giant skeletons found in ancient Roman town, Turin, Italy. One of the reasons for Hannibal's early successes against Roman legions 2,100 years ago may have been soldiers 7 feet tall. Excavations made up Paceto Hill, 3 miles from here, have uncovered an ancient Roman town, skeletons of men and horses, and what is apparently part of a temple. 7 of the skeletons indicated that the men were 7 feet tall, of an African race. Okay, so again, we find in these things where these people say they're African race or Neanderthal or whatever it is, because they find these different skeletal types. They don't know what to make of them, so they're assuming they're just more primitive people, such as, pejoratively the African people there, and Neanderthals, which they didn't understand anything about back then either, although you find in early 20th history and current 20th history accounts that, they're saying they likened the skulls to Neanderthal skulls. Unfortunately, Neanderthals, you can read right here with me, anatomical evidence suggests they were much stronger than modern humans, while they were slightly shorter than the average human. Well, the average human is today is 5.8, and back then it would have been 5.3 to 5.5 feet. Okay, so what are they saying? They're like 4 foot high guys. Well, certainly not giants. All right, so in any case, highly unlikely on both counts, whether it be African race or Neanderthal race, whatever. It's a separate race of hominids, a separate race of humanoids from the past that they're just not talking about, and again, may be part of the whole historical reset narrative, or at least a piece of it, I would assume. Okay, so think about that. Girgenti, Sicily, 10'6". It's just interesting. Girgenti sounds certainly almost like giganti, or gigantic or whatever, similar word or whatever, but who knows what it means in Italian. 10'6". That's a mighty big guy or humanoid or whatever it is. The discovery was made by Captain Allen in spring of 1807, some miles from the port of Girgenti, Sicily. When the bones were placed in the proper position, the skeleton was measured by Captain Allen at 11 feet 4 inches Italian, which is about 10 feet 6 inches English. The skull with its jaws were about the dimensions of a 2-gallon bucket. The body and other giants were found in the stone sarcophagi 170 feet below a sulfur mine. So way below ground. Again, the giants that lived underground, the Minotaur. Okay, horned giants living underground. Okay, not a story about a cow man. All right. So that's an awfully big guy, 10'6". I bet you guys like that could throw around big stone block and build things real quick, while us as average sized human beings of 5'3" and 5'5", way back then is what they say. The Egyptians, all 5'3" and 5 guys, need like 100 guys to do the same job. Whereas these guys only need like, 3 or 4 guys, lift this block up, put it right on there, done. No sleds, no slings, no cranes, no water, no sand, no ramps, no nothing. Okay, just walk up there and put it right up over there. All right, guys, stop thinking about all this crap where, we built all these things, because we didn't. We didn't. We want to take credit for it because we're little jerks. We're little punks. That's how we are. That's why everybody thinks historical reset and everything, because we're little punks. And we heard so many tales of ancient kings and emperors in the Americas and around the world. They just rewrite history to fit whatever their notions are. Okay, so how many times has that been done? Do we really know anything about our past? I doubt it. Sincerely doubt it. Palermo giant, a monster skull, one that was said to be bigger than a bushel basket. One of the most remarkable finds of the gigantic human remains of which we have any record was that said to have been made at Palermo, Sicily in the year 1516, when an entire skeleton of unheard of proportions was unearthed by some marble quarry men. These mammoth remains measured exactly 34 feet from head to foot and 9 feet 7 inches from point to point of the shoulders. A stone axe buried with this old-time giant may still be seen at Palermo in the section Z of the St. Isarent Museum. It is made of a bluish-looking fine-grained boulder and appears to be about 2 feet 8 inches long by 1 foot broad and 9 inches through its thickest place. A musty, rusty-looking tag attached to the relic informs the visitor that it weighs 52 pounds, but the general verdict is that it could not weigh over 30 or 35 pounds. The skeleton was burned by a mob in the year 1662 during the prevalence of the Black Death at Palermo, the ignorant, superstitious people believing that it was connected in some mysterious ways with the death-dealing distemper. The skull of this giant, according to Abby Ferregus, was largely excessive of the basket said to hold the bushel, being fitted above and below with teeth to the number of 64, the, each of which would have weighed 2 ounces. Cavalier Soroy claimed to have found a skull on Tenerife that had 60 teeth. Westminster Gazette. So here's another. Well, this one is absolutely gigantic. This is more like the Jolly Green Giant, okay, with a head that probably doesn't fit it, but I don't think they have the dimensions right there. But again, we've heard accounts of giants which having extra teeth in the jaw. In this case, many more extra teeth in the jaw, seems like double. So we can assume maybe this thing is double the size of an average human being, quite large, okay, with all these extra teeth in its jaw. And again, if people not being able to identify or don't know the difference between animal bones and human bones in the past, it's ridiculous at a time where so many people were were butchering their own meat, and the battlefields were littered with the skeletal remains of fighting men. Okay, so I find it hard to believe that they couldn't identify things in the past. Besides the fact that the Romans had taken care of that and studied that, the Greeks and Romans of the past have studied that and made a fine science of it many, many, many thousands of years ago. Okay, this whole thing that people were ignorant or whatever, it is ridiculous. The only ignorant people that we're talking about in any of these conversations is us. We're the most ignorant people out of all these people who ever lived in the past. Okay, we are the most controlled. We are the most, assaulted with all kinds of information coming from species sources, et cetera, et cetera. So we're the most delusional out of all the people in the past about the nature of reality and what history probably could be. So anyway, guys, it's just a short one, a little bit of a short one or whatever, but I wanted to bring you these accounts from Italy just to show you again, there's just nowhere you can go on this planet without finding remains of giants, basically. So, and many of the untold accounts that I'm sure that we could know about if some of our European brothers and sisters would be able to find out about those things for us, we'd probably end up with thousands more accounts of the giants coming from elsewhere around the world. Okay, not only Europe. All right, guys. So again, some of these things, have accounts, in for characters in modern times, okay, in historical times, okay, but these reflect, I guess, the last vestiges of the giant hybrids that seem to be dying out over the centuries, and as they intermingle with the peoples that they live with, and all these traits were bred out of them, similar to the Mandan tribe that we were discussing in the last video, with their blonde hair and other features, skin pigmentation, whatever. Eventually, interbreeded with other tribes, it was just bred out of them. Other than people like the Frisian giants, the people of the Fiji, kings of the Fiji Island, and the Watusi tribe in Africa, which we know are giants living today, okay, with the giant DNA in them. All right, guys. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed those accounts from Italy and Sicily. Something to think about, many things to think about when you hear about these things. Again, some of these accounts of these giants being found so far underground, just hundreds of feet underground. What are they doing there? I mean, obviously, these giants figure heavily into the underground cities of the past. And I think that's the way we should think about them when we do entertain these things about the cities of the underground cities of the past, that they were inhabited by these giants. And again, this is the kind of thing with the, giant bear in Afghanistan that they found in a cave and killed the poor guy, and whatever they did with him, he died living underground possibly as well. And no care for his family or anybody might have been left behind. Just hey, we take this freak of nature with us and put him on display like some aliens, some you know uh, low empathy, no empathy aliens from another universe come here to look at us like as zoo animals or something like that. All right, guys. So please do hit the like button if you like the video, and if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. We got a lot of stuff to go through on the Giants International, so please stay tuned to the channel. And in between, I'm going to bring you very interesting videos that I think you're going to love. All right, guys. Anyway, Bugcat7 signing out. Peace.